You're listening to Charting Cryptos and Commodities for this week. Let's jump into the charts. Of course, this week started on the 22nd of May. We can see that if we go back, and I'm just going to go ahead for most of this, if not all of it, and use the weekly chart, which is what we're really keyed on. You can see that on Bitcoin, the weekly chart hit its most recent low back on the week beginning the 8th. The low was $25,800. So far this week, we're going on, the third week now since things went to solid red down candles. We can see that the low was 26,547. So we've not, in fact, even hit the low of last week yet. We do have a red down candle. It is showing that things are continuing on that down move. We're green as far as the volume goes right now. That's, of course, subject to change. 2 days in, we had good volume when everything started off a little above average. Not so much last week. Looks like the down move is slowing, but again, you can see these herky-jerky attitudes that we have with Bitcoin. What I keep talking about is hoping that things will move back to a nice solid chart that moves in discernible patterns. Now, we don't have to stick just with the weekly. We can, of course, look for some patterns with the 2-day, look for some patterns with the half-day that actually have here recently, starting back in on May the 20th or so. You can sort of see where we've had things roll around okay. You can see, again, we go back even to the 18th and so, not great. And again, remember, we're looking at 195-minute chart on the 24-hour-a-day chart. That's why there are so few days encompassed with all these candlesticks. But again, 2-day chart, we can see, the semblance of a little bit of a pattern, but none of it really works. So we want things to start working. Right now, though, we'll pay attention that Bitcoin is in a down move at this point. How long will it go on? Don't know. But we're hoping that when it does turn around, it gives us a positive signal, one that we can start counting on. Now let's look at what's happening with Ethereum. Ethereum, again, hit its most recent high back on the week beginning the 10th of April, and since then started slowing down and moving down. We can see we're sitting right there on the weekly trend line from last week, where things are forming this week with lots of indecision so far. You can see on the 2-day where it's trying to push through that, on the half-day where it has. So we will pay attention. Up for the day, 2.11%. So again, we'd like discernible patterns that would help us out. If we look at the top 10 cryptocurrency, that is Bitwise, it is BITW. It's Bitwise 10 Crypto Index Fund. It tracks the top 10 cryptocurrencies weighted as per market share. And again, it's a little bit better. We can see where it topped back on week of the April 10th. And for the last few weeks, it's been devolving, heading down. Now remember, it's primarily reflective of what? Well, Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the big market mover, is the majority, so it's more reflective of Bitcoin than anything else. Looks somewhat similar to it, but again, we like to keep an eye on how all of those top 10 cryptocurrencies weighted by market share, how they move on this chart, and it's rather inexpensive. So again, something again for you to look at and possibly practice trade in the future as cryptocurrencies sort themselves out. So we leave the cryptocurrency world and we go to commodities, and we will start with the biggest downer for the day and work our way into those that weren't moving down as much or moving up. We only have 2 greens, that is sugarcane and gas. So we'll talk about that when we get to it, and that is not natural gas, but the U.S. Gasoline Fund. We look at where we are on U.S. natural gas. We can see, well, again, let's pump this up into the big chart and we'll suck this in some so you can see. when natural gas hit its high, August of last year, and then trundling down sideways for a little while on down. And again, we are sort of bouncing off of the low right now. It was down for the day 1.71%. But again, sort of right down at the bottom. So we'll keep an eye on natural gas, see where it goes. I hear on the news shortages and rising prices and all that. Well, it's at a low of the last couple of years right now. If we really suck this in, how far back do we have to go to get as low as we are now? We got to go back a ways, my friends, a long ways. So again, you can see that as far as what you're hearing in the news, take it with a grain of salt. Do watch it. And if you see it start to take off, might be something for you to consider jumping into. Might be a good reason to follow and potentially practice, trade it, see what works, what doesn't, using your weekly, your 2-day, and your half-day chart. What about copper? Copper used in a lot of industry. Well, if it's reflective of what's happening in industry across the world, you can see that copper for the last several weeks has been trundling down for the day, 1.10%. We can go back here to July of last year, and you can, of course, see where it hit its most recent low. And again, we got a ways to go before we get there. Copper had tried to take off and sort of topped out back in January and been just sort of devolving since that time period. What about coffee? Coffee had spiked back on the week beginning April 17, then down for 3 weeks, and again popping up a little bit. It's far from its low back in January and far from its most recent high back in February of 2022. So we will keep an eye on coffee, see where it's going. Now, silver, we saw silver peak there on right at the beginning of May, and then we're going into the third week of down movement in silver for the day alone, down 0.75%. But we had a good run. We rode that baby up in silver, and it was beautiful. And again, gave us an easy out point there, and we captured some nice profit in our practice trade. Soybeans. Well, again, soybeans, a lot of things live on soybeans. Humans eat them. Also animals, we can see where soybeans peaked back in June of 2022, then sharply down, climbed up for a little while, peaked most recently back in February, toward the end of February, and then hammering down. It's got a ways to go before it hits the bottom that we saw back in November of 21, but again, we've seen it just moving down strongly over the last several weeks. Sugarcane, maybe the rise in sugarcane starting to peel off. Keep your eye on it. This is the first time that we've really seen things pull off quite a bit since sugarcane cut back in the week beginning March the 20th. So it had been just climbing. It is peeling off a little bit now. Gold, of course, like silver, we got 2 weeks of down movement in gold. Peaked in its down movement last week. Hasn't reached that low yet, so we're watching on gold. Was up a little bit for the day, 0.12%. Now, gasoline. We saw gasoline peak back there in June, and then that's June 2022. Then hard down till September 26th of last year. Then starting in October, up some, then back, then up some, then back, then up some. And, it's just sort of been seesawing around, but nowhere near that high of $80.29. Right now, so far for the week, it's been a high of $61.28, which is good to see for those of us who buy gasoline to drive around. Oil, likewise, over the last few weeks, down. This week, a green spinning top. Corn, a lot of things live on corn. Corn, again, like these other food stocks, or food stocks. When I say food stocks, things that eat food, not as in an equity, but food sources, we'll say. we can see, like several of the others, such as wheat, it is also down. So again, we just see all of these things between wheat and corn and soybeans. Sugarcane's the only one that's really up. I'm trying to see if we got any other food in here. Soybeans, no, well, of course, coffee, which again, those of us who are addicted to it, we sure feel like we live off of it. It's been going up, some along with, but nothing like sugarcane shooting up. So let's see over the next few weeks if sugarcane's really cutting back or if it's just gaining a second wind like it did back there toward the end of March and then shot up again. But what goes up does have to come down. That's where we are, folks, as we look at commodities, as we look at cryptocurrencies. And again, I find it so fascinating to cover with you these items at least once a week, just so we keep an eye on what's really going on, particularly in the commodity sector with real stuff. And so we can continue to hope that Bitcoin and the cryptocurrencies are going to level out and start moving in discernible patterns. That's where we are, my friends. God bless. All the best from the whole team at Charting Wealth World Headquarters.